Be a hot take for some people here, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say that I think the Sugar Bowl is going to be the closest game of the round two playoff cycle. And I know that Georgia fans will push back on me. And I'm saying this even though that Georgia is still my pick to win the national title this year. But I think there just is a part of me and just a part of based off what I've seen from Ole Miss this season that I think a lot of people are just simply overlooking Ole Miss. And I get that people want to say, oh, well, it was Lane's offense. It was his thing, this, that, or the other. But I think what the Tulane game really proved for me is that this university is behind Pete Golding. The program is behind Pete Golding. And also the players legitimately believe in him. And I think you're just at the point now where Ole Miss proved that they can still continue to score, that the defense is, statistically speaking, mediocre, but there's still some opportunities there for them to get a couple victories. Now, how healthy Chambliss is, that maybe could end up being an issue since he was in concussion protocol during the Tulane games. That does give me a little bit of pause, but I do believe that there is a legitimate way that Ole Miss can win this game, even though I do think Georgia will ultimately end up winning. But if you ask me, how does Ole Miss win this game? I think quite simply is you have to get the run game going. Kewan Lacy, to me, is one of the most underrated running backs in the entire country. Somebody that really doesn't get a lot of credit for what he's done. When they played back last month, or I think it was like a month or two ago, when they played the first time this year, Kewan Lacy had 88 rushing yards for 24 carries. And he only had one explosive run. And I think an explosive run in this circumstance is anything over 10 yards. He only had one run for 12 yards or whatever. And then the rest of his carries just shy of 2.7. But what he is really good at is being able to get those yards after catch. He's forced 17 missed tackles this year, which is one of the best in the SEC. He's averaging over 21 yards a carry and over 2,100 or 1,250 yards rushing. And quite frankly, that's just really an incredible stat, especially since 858 of those is after contact. And I think there's been times where Georgia's linebacking core has been criticized at times for missing some tackles. And I do think there is going to be a legitimate opportunity for Ole Miss to get some explosive plays there. Now, I think at the same time, Georgia has demonstrated that they can stop them. But I think just like the first game, what this game is really going to come down to is how well can Kirby Smart make adjustments. And I think we've seen it time and time again where he's been able to be adaptable. He understands what needs to happen in order for them to win the game. But this is just as much of a test for Pete Golding as well. I think let's just say even if Ole Miss gets spanked by 20, it doesn't really prove necessarily that they got the wrong guy in Pete Golding, right? I don't think it necessarily proves any of that. I think what really I'm the most fascinated about is how this defense shows up for Ole Miss, because I would argue if Ole Miss's defense even somewhat showed up in that first matchup, we're having a completely different conversation about this Ole Miss team. And not to mention, in the fourth quarter, they were up 35-26. So considering that they put up that many points versus Georgia defense, that for the most part was fairly strong up to that point. So if anything, they've shown that they've have some moments of vulnerability there. And I can't stress enough how impressive this Georgia coaching staff is between Kirby Smart and Mike Bobo and Glenn Schumann. All those dudes deserve a ton of credit for what they've done, because there's a reason why they have 10 wins every year. There's a reason why we talk about them in the national title contention every year. And there's a reason why I think they're going to win the national title this year. It's because they're so good at what they do and they maximize the talent that they have. And what we're seeing in the most part is we're seeing this in the quarterback room. I mean, I thought it was an incredible statement last year when they played Texas in the SEC championship game. And then a little while after, they said, "Hey, we're not going to get anyone in the transfer portal. We don't need anybody in the transfer portal. We're going to roll with our man Gunnar Stockton." And all things considered, he has shown that he can be one of the best quarterbacks in the entire SEC. And also, Chambliss has done the same thing, but we'll talk about him in a minute. But Gunnar Stockton, 23 touchdowns to 5 interceptions. He's a guy who can throw on the run. He's a guy that gets through his reads relatively quickly. And I think what I like most about Gunnar Stockton more than anything is he plays with a sense of tenacity and he plays with a sense of he always has a chip on his shoulder. He always has that confidence that instills of how good of a leader he is. And I think those type of characteristics are just incredibly difficult to find. And when you have somebody like that, it's just really special to watch that happen on the field. And I think we're seeing that more and more as the season evolves. But if you're Georgia, I mean, the footprint that you have for yourself is number one, in order for them to win this game, Nate Frazier and Chauncey Bowers combined have to have over 100 yards rushing. They have to make that happen somehow. Do I think Gunnar Stockton is good enough for them to win the game? Yes. He can he can make it happen. But I think you could also argue that Zachariah Branch could possibly be their X factor. He's a guy who's super quick. He's a guy that can get open. They utilize him in a lot of different packages, particularly within the slot. He's their leading receiver with just shy of 800 yards in the season. And, you know, whether you watched him at USC or whether you watched him now, there's a reason why he's so coveted. And there's a reason why defenses all over the country just have difficulty stopping him. And if you're Ole Miss, that could really be your Achilles heel. And that's also the reason why I think Frazier and Bowers have the capability of having over 100 yards rushing in this game. Because I think there's going to be a lot of moments where Ole Miss is going to drop back 7, 8 guys and not necessarily have as many guys in the box, and therefore open up opportunities for Nate Frazier and Bowers to be able to get some bigger plays, especially on third down. And for the most part, Georgia has been relatively successful on third down. However, I would like to see them run the ball a little bit more. And I get it. The running back room hasn't been healthy all year. There's been times, there's been moments where I think you would like to see that more. But to me, this feels like a game where if Georgia can figure that part out, I think it could be a really impressive showing for them. Even though I still do find this game the most intriguing matchup out of really all the games out of the Big Four that we have. And let's turn our attention to Chambliss a little bit, right? A guy who started off D2 at Ferris State, backs up Austin Simmons. Austin Simmons gets hurt, in comes Chambliss, and he just deserves so much credit for what he's done to be in a position of just having adaptability, really just a cannon for an arm, really strong mechanics, and a guy that can extend plays with his feet, a guy that gets through his progressions relatively quickly, and a guy, most importantly, that can take off and run with the football. Now, I think there's moments, for example, where we have seen him struggle a little bit, right? I go back and point to that Washington State game where, quite frankly, the entire offense came out sluggish, right? But particularly in that game is where I kind of draw some concerns too. But at the same time, when you go back and you look at the running backs that Ole Miss has had over the past 3-4 seasons, no matter what, they always find a way to be able to make that happen, right? And when you have Charlie Weiss, you know, now calling plays for you, I think he's going to utilize this as a really big opportunity to be able to showcase the entire country. Hey, do I know that I'm following Lane Kiffin to LSU? Absolutely. But do I have my own offensive play calling chops that I want to showcase the entire country and maybe be able to start a little fire and be able to knock off Georgia, 100%. I think he can definitely utilize that. He's been around football his entire life, and I think he is not really underrated coach, and especially as the quarterbacks coach too. I don't think he gets as much credit as he should in terms of his capability and being able to develop guys like Jackson Dart and Matt Corral, and now Chambliss and Austin Simmons too. But let's take a look at Chambliss' stats real quick. I still believe he is emerging and is one of the best quarterbacks in the SEC. Just over 3,000 yards, 18 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. So his decision making has been quite frankly phenomenal this year. So I think he deserves a lot of credit for that. On top of that, just shy of 500 yards rushing with another 6 touchdowns there. So when you kind of look at things outside the box scores, you have to be really, quite frankly, just really proud of what Ole Miss has accomplished this year, particularly on the offensive side of the ball. For them to be able to get through the adversities that they have, for them to be, for the most part, showing up in really every big game this year that they've done. And there is a recipe for success for them here. If they can get Kewan Lacy going, if Chambliss even looks 90% healthy and he can continue to use his feet and not put himself in positions where he's taking too many serious hits, there definitely is an avenue that Ole Miss can win this game. But again, the reason why I kind of push back on it is at the end of the day, Georgia is just simply a more talented team right now. They have a guy like Gunnar Stockton who's been incredibly poised. I think they have guys like Zachariah Branch that I think ultimately Ole Miss is going to have trouble, slowing down a little bit. At least in terms of the country right now, they they rank 21st in sacks, which is a relatively good stat. So they have shown some capabilities to be able to get to the quarterback there. But what most scares me is the fact that they rank 111th in the country in turnovers. That is a stat that scares me. That's a stat that I find a little overwhelming. And quite frankly, that's a stat that is going to hurt you when you play teams in the country that simply don't make as many mistakes. And so for you to hone in on those moments, I just think that that's going to be what ultimately ends up making the difference in this game. Because, when I look at Ole Miss defensively, 33rd in yards, 69th in rushing, and 63rd in sacks. Yes, there's been some moments where, quite frankly, they've been mediocre, but there's also a part of you at the same time, too, when you look at Ole Miss's offense, there's a reason why they're one of the top scoring teams in the entire country. There's a reason why they're third in passing, and there's a reason why they don't really turn the ball over. So look for all that to kind of come together. But ultimately, what's going to be the difference maker, in my opinion, is Nate Frazier and Bowers rushing for over 100 yards, Zachariah Branch at least having a touchdown, and Gunnar Stockton not throwing a single interception. So give me Georgia in a very, very close game. I think this is going to be a game where it's going to come down to the fourth quarter. It's going to come down to the final drive. And most importantly, it's going to come down to who makes better adjustments. And I think Kirby Smart's experience in this moment is ultimately end up going to be the difference maker. But I think when you end up watching this game, everybody in the country is going to say to themselves, Pete Golding is the real freaking deal.